It was raining the day my grandmother died. Not the kind of soft, poetic drizzle you see in old movies. No, this was a thunder-soaked sky that looked like it was mourning with us, as if even the heavens knew something important had ended. The air was thick, heavy with a sadness I hadn't yet unpacked. But even heavier was something else, suspicion. Fake hugs, forced condolences, and sideways glances turned the church into a theater of hypocrisy. Every seat was filled, not with people mourning her loss, but with relatives calculating what her life had been worth in dollars. I could feel it. This wasn't grief. It was greed dressed in black. I hadn't even sat down before my cousin Vanessa whispered, "You know she left most of it to your brother, right?" Her breath smelled like mint and malice. I didn't respond. I hadn't come for the inheritance. I came because Grandma Millie had practically raised me after my parents were killed in a car crash when I was 10. She taught me to cook, taught me chess, taught me to fight without raising a fist. She had that old-school strength, kind but immovable. I was her favorite, not because she said it, but because I knew it in the way she looked at me when she laughed. My brother Scott, on the other hand, barely visited her in the last 5 years. But that didn't matter to most of the family. To them, blood meant entitlement, and appearances meant everything. After the service, we gathered at her house, a creaky 2-story Victorian she and my grandfather had bought in 1958. It still smelled like lavender and dust and old wood. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was an aging man with a crooked spine and a steel briefcase that probably held more drama than a season of Succession. We all huddled in the living room like scavengers at a carcass, pretending to be civilized while waiting for meat to be handed out. That's when it happened. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and said, "Before I read the will, there's a video message." The room froze. A video? The TV flickered to life, and there she was, Grandma Millie, sitting in her rocking chair, looking directly into the camera like she knew this would be her final encore. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," she said, voice strong, eyes sharper than ever. "And I know every one of you is wondering what I did with my money. So let me tell you, I didn't leave it to the person who visited me out of obligation or called me only on holidays. I left it to the person who stayed, the person who listened, the person who knew I was more than a check to be cashed." The room went dead silent. You could hear hearts stop beating. So yes, I left $900,000 to my grandson Alex. My name, it hit the room like a grenade. Aunt Marla gasped so hard, she dropped her wine. Uncle Ron coughed like he'd swallowed a wasp. Scott, my older brother, just stared, his face frozen somewhere between disbelief and absolute fury. I didn't react. I couldn't. It felt like the walls had melted away. My ears were ringing. My heart wasn't racing. It was galloping. I could feel the weight of a million unspoken words pressing against my ribcage. And then Grandma added one final line. "What you do with it, Alex, will define who you are." The TV clicked off. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating, until the eruption began. "This is T." Scott shouted, leaping to his feet. She was senile. He manipulated her. My aunt chimed in, screaming something about unfair influence, while my cousin Jeff started Googling how to contest a will. I just stood there, stone still, while inside me a tornado was starting to spin. Not because I had money, not because they were angry, but because I knew they all expected me to fail. They were counting on it. Later that night, after the vultures had left and I was alone in her house, I walked into the kitchen and opened a drawer where Grandma kept her handwritten recipes. There was a note in her curling cursive. "Don't let them break you. You're not like them." I sat on the cold tile floor for a long time, staring at that note, the storm outside mirroring the one inside me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My world had been flipped upside down. I had just inherited nearly $1 million, and with it, a bullseye on my back. I knew what was coming. Calls from family I hadn't heard from in years. Guilt trips, legal threats, rumors spread like wildfire. But what they didn't know was that I had a plan. I wasn't going to buy cars or party in Miami. I wasn't going to blow it all on crypto or disappear on some spiritual retreat. I was going to build something. But before I could do that, I had to survive the war that was coming. Because $900,000 doesn't just make you rich, it makes you a target. And when you're the target, you either run or you fight. I chose to fight. The moment the video ended and Grandma Millie's voice faded into static, the silence was thick enough to drown in. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. It was as if time had frozen for those 10 impossible seconds after she said my name, Alex, and attached it to a jaw-dropping sum of $900,000. Then, like a flipped switch, the chaos erupted. Aunt Marla's wine glass shattered on the hardwood as it slipped from her trembling hand. Scott, my older brother, lunged forward in disbelief, nearly knocking over the coffee table. His eyes, once indifferent, barely meeting mine all morning, were now seething, bloodshot, and manic. "This is AF *** King joke," he barked, voice trembling with rage. She was manipulated. She wasn't in her right mind. His hands were clenched so tight, I thought he'd snapped the old mahogany armrest in two. The room transformed into a courtroom without a judge, with family members hurling accusations like daggers. "You've never held a stable job. You're going to piss it all away on some YouTube scam. This isn't what Mom would have wanted." And yet it was. That was the hardest part for them to accept, that someone like me, the quiet one, the so-called underachiever, the one they'd all written off, was the person Grandma trusted most. The will, signed and dated 6 months prior to her passing, left no ambiguity. It listed every asset, her savings, investments, her life insurance, even the house, and clearly stated that I was the sole beneficiary. Mr. Henderson, our stoic family lawyer, who had known Grandma for over 20 years, confirmed everything. This was her decision, he said calmly, trying to hold back the growing wildfire fury in the room. She was of sound mind, and I have recordings of every meeting to prove it. The venom turned inward after that. Accusations flew between cousins. Vanessa blamed her mom for not staying in touch with Grandma. Uncle Ron muttered about family politics and manipulated old women. Even the ones who had been silent during the funeral were suddenly experts in estate law, scrambling for any possible way to contest the will. Scott stormed out and slammed the door so hard the old window panes rattled. I stayed seated, staring at the blank TV screen, as if Grandma might magically reappear and explain how the hell I was supposed to handle this level of insanity. I had inherited $900,000, but I felt like I just detonated a bomb in the middle of our already fragile family. Over the next few hours, the vultures didn't just circle, they attacked. My phone buzzed nonstop. A dozen missed calls. Texts pouring in from family members who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Hey, cousin, can we talk?" "Let's get coffee soon," beaming face with smiling eyes. Grandma always wanted to help the whole family, not just one person. Some were passive-aggressive. Some were just plain aggressive. One cousin even offered to help invest the money if I gave him just $100,000 to start. I blocked him. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the house, circling from room to room like a ghost. I opened every drawer, every closet, as if some magical blueprint would appear showing me what I was supposed to do next. Instead, I found memories. Photos of me and Grandma baking cookies. A dusty board game we used to play on rainy Saturdays. A VHS tape labeled Alex's 10th birthday. She hadn't just left me money. She'd left me responsibility, legacy, pressure, and behind every sentimental object was a weight I couldn't shake. Don't screw this up. The days that followed were hellish. Scott lawyered up. He found some ambulance chaser attorney who promised the challenges were based on elder manipulation and emotional coercion. Marla started posting cryptic Facebook statuses like, "When people take advantage of the elderly, God is watching." Some family members tried the guilt route. Others played the pity card. And a few just went nuclear. One cousin even spray-painted the word thief on my garage door. I didn't respond. I didn't post a single thing. I became a ghost in my own town. I stopped answering texts, avoided the grocery store, and even considered changing my number. But there was one place I kept going, Grandma's house. I cleaned it up, cleared out decades of clutter, donated her clothes to the local women's shelter, repainted the porch she loved sitting on. And during one of those late evenings, I found something I wasn't expecting. Tucked inside an old recipe book was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 3 months before she passed. Alex, it read, I know what they'll say. I know they'll come for you. But I didn't leave you this money to make them happy. I left it because you see people. You always have. When I lost your grandfather, it was you who sat beside me in silence when everyone else tried to talk. You're not loud. You're not flashy. But you care. You listen. And that's worth more than money. Use this wisely. Build something. Love something. And please, for the love of God, don't let them drag you down. I read that letter 100 times. Memorized every loop of her cursive. Let the tears fall until they dried on the page. But things got worse before they got better. The legal summons came 2 weeks later. Scott's attorney filed an official petition to contest the will. I was served papers at a diner while having breakfast. He claimed I had manipulated a mentally unfit woman, that Grandma was coerced through emotional dependence and not a sound mind during her final months. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something. But I didn't. Instead, I hired a lawyer of my own, Rachel Kim, a firecracker state attorney with a reputation for winning ugly cases. She reviewed the video testimony, interviewed Mr. Henderson, gathered medical records, and then sat me down. They have nothing, she said. But that doesn't mean they'll go away quietly. And they didn't. For 6 months, I was dragged through mediation, depositions, and court hearings. Scott claimed I was emotionally unstable. He presented photos of me from college parties and tried to argue I had a history of reckless behavior. Aunt Marla accused me of manipulating Grandma by exploiting my trauma from my parents' death. It was sick. Every ugly family secret was dredged up and weaponized. But through it all, I stayed quiet. I let my lawyer do the talking. I focused on what I could control. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Scott offered me a deal. Give me half, he said over the phone one night, and I'll drop everything. His voice was smug, entitled, like he thought he had already won. You don't want this getting dragged through the mud, do you? You've got enough on your plate. Just split it. Be the bigger person. I hung up. No response. The next day, I filed a counter motion for harassment and defamation. Rachel backed me up 100%. When the final court hearing arrived, the judge didn't even need a recess. After reviewing the documentation, the will, the video testimony, and Grandma's clean bill of cognitive health, he dismissed the petition with prejudice. Scott lost. Marla stormed out. I walked out of that courtroom exhausted, but vindicated. The money was still mine, but so was the target on my back. After the legal dust settled, I disappeared for a while. Took 2 weeks off everything. I needed clarity. Peace. Grandma didn't just leave me wealth. She left me with a question. What now? And that question haunted me. I could have taken the easy route, bought a Tesla, rented a condo in L.A., gone on some eat, pray, love trip across Europe. But I didn't, because deep down, I remembered who I was before all this. I was the quiet kid, the overlooked one, the kid who used to sketch out imaginary cities in the back of math class, dreaming of building something real. I remembered Grandma once saying, people will doubt you louder than they'll believe in you. Build anyway. So I decided to build. And the first brick will be something nobody, especially not my family, would see coming. They didn't stop after the courtroom loss. In fact, the defeat only seemed to make them angrier. The very next day, I woke up to find an anonymous Reddit post going viral under the title, "My brother manipulated our dying grandma into leaving him everything. AMA." It was Scott, even though he never named me. The details were precise enough to light up every local Facebook mom group and stir online hate from every direction. Suddenly, I was being labeled as a parasite, a narcissist, a gold digger. I hadn't even touched the money yet. Not a single dollar had been spent. But the world already had a version of me, a cartoon villain in someone else's sob story. I got emails from fake accounts telling me to kill myself. Phone calls from blocked numbers whispering threats before hanging up. Even my workplace, where I worked as a part-time graphic designer, receive an anonymous complaint accusing me of being mentally unstable and involved in inheritance fraud. They placed me on leave for review, and through it all, one message kept echoing in my mind louder than the rest. You're gonna waste it all. That line, it came from Scott's mouth the last time we spoke face to face. I remember it so clearly. We were standing in Grandma's driveway after a failed mediation meeting. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers and looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. You're gonna blow it. You always do. He smirked, exhaled smoke, and added, You're not built for this kind of responsibility. You don't have the guts to build anything with it. Then he flicked his cigarette onto the grass and walked away like he'd dropped the mic. But what he didn't know was that those words lit something in me. Not rage, not revenge. Fuel, pure, undiluted fuel. I wasn't going to respond to his post, or his lies, or his whisper campaigns. I wasn't going to rant online or beg for sympathy. I was going to do something so massive, so undeniable, that every word he ever spoke about me would rot in his throat. I was going to build something that mattered. The first step was to educate myself. I didn't want to fall into the trap so many others did after receiving an inheritance. I devoured books, YouTube lectures, and podcasts about real estate, investing, financial literacy, nonprofit work, and generational wealth. I talked to advisors, sat in on free City Hall development meetings, and took online courses late into the night. While the world thought I was hiding in shame, I was building a blueprint. I remember Grandma once told me, the smartest people aren't always the loudest. They're the ones listening while everyone else talks. I stopped reacting. I stopped explaining. I let them talk. I listened. But even as I planned my future, the world refused to let me forget its doubts. One day, I ran into my high school history teacher, Mr. Blanton, at the grocery store, a man I used to admire. He gave me this forced smile and said, Hey, I heard you came into some money. Be careful, son. I've seen a lot of people burn through windfalls. He didn't mean it maliciously, but that didn't matter. It was the same old assumption. Because I was quiet, poor, and introverted for most of my life, there was no way I could be responsible with money. Another time, a former coworker messaged me to say, I know this sounds random, but could you loan me like $5,000? I have this idea for a startup. I barely knew the guy, and when I declined, he replied with, Must be nice to hoard Grandma's money while the rest of us struggle. I realized then that the money didn't just change my bank account, it changed how people saw me. I went from invisible to a walking ATM, a target, a fantasy, a villain, but I never responded. I just kept listening, kept learning, kept building. Then came the hardest test of all, my own self-doubt. I started waking up in cold sweats, gripped by the fear that maybe they were right. Maybe I would waste it. Maybe I was a family's weakest link, and Grandma had just been blinded by emotion. Every decision felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Should I buy property? What if it crashed? Should I donate some? What if it wasn't enough or went to the wrong cause? Even spending $12.99 on a book made me feel like I was committing a crime. I began to understand why sudden wealth destroyed people. Not because they were greedy, but because they were terrified. Terrified of being wrong. Terrified of confirming everyone's worst expectations. I didn't leave the house for 2 weeks. I ate instant noodles, even though I had enough money to dine anywhere I wanted. I ignored calls. I didn't talk to anyone except a stray cat that started showing up on the porch. I named him Ledger. Ledger would curl up beside me as I scribbled notes and ideas on legal pads, surrounded by crumpled drafts and scratched-out plans. Then one day, in the quiet, it hit me. I wasn't going to prove them wrong by living like a monk or giving it all away. I wasn't going to shut the world up by playing small. I had to go big. I had to do the thing they believed was impossible. I had to turn $900,000 into something so unshakably real. No lie could touch it. So I called a contractor, then a real estate agent, then a city permit office. One by one, I started stringing together a dream I had as a kid, to take something broken and make it whole. There was a rundown piece of property on the edge of town, an old community center that had been abandoned for years. Rotting walls, shattered windows, graffiti from top to bottom. But it had bones. It had history. It had soul. The owner was a tired man in his 70s who had been trying to sell for years. I told him my plan. I wanted to buy it, fix it, and turn it into a hybrid co-working space, youth mentorship hub, and local community kitchen. A place where kids could come after school instead of getting into trouble. A place where single moms could take job skills classes. A place where people like Grandma Millie would have volunteered if she were still alive. He looked at me like I was nuts, but he sold it to me at a heavy discount. Your grandma, he said, she was a good woman. I'll give you a chance. Don't waste it. And just like that, the foundation was laid. Not just for the building, but for my redemption. I hired locals to help with the renovations. Former classmates who had been working dead-end construction jobs. High schoolers looking for summer gigs. People who had written me off, now working beside me, watching the vision unfold. They asked questions, they made jokes, and slowly, the narrative started to shift. I didn't tell anyone online. I didn't brag. I let the hammers and nails speak for me. I worked until my hands were blistered. I painted walls myself. I cried the night we installed the kitchen. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. And then, right before the grand opening, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just one sentence typed on a plain white sheet. Still waiting for you to crash and burn. Don't disappoint. Scott. I didn't need proof. I knew it was him.